In this video, I'll demonstrate how to download and use SynthEBD with Mod Organizer 2. SynthEBD is going to be available on the Nexus and on its GitHub page. I'll try to keep the Nexus page up to date, but you can always count on the latest version to be on GitHub. Once you're on the GitHub page, you can go to the Releases link and download the archive with the latest release. That'll be in the Assets drop-down here. For example, here it's version 0.9.6.5 at the time of filming. I've already downloaded this. Now I'll open that up. Now I will go to my Mod Organizer 2 folder. If you don't have it already, make a Tools subfolder. This is where you'll put apps like SynthEDD and DynDoLOD. I'll add a subfolder here for SynthEBD, and we'll go ahead and extract these files into that folder. While that's extracting, there are two mods that SynthEBD is going to depend on to run its texture distribution. The first one is the original EBD SSE mod, so you'll download the main file through your mod manager. If you're on VR or on a version of Special Edition lower than 1.5.97, you'll want to download the optional file as well, and use that to override the same file in the main download. You're going to also need the version of J containers that's appropriate for your version of Skyrim. In my Mod Organizer 2, I already have both of those mods installed. Now that SynthEBD has been extracted, we'll add it as an executable to MO2. Now we can launch SynthEBD. We'll be greeted with this splash screen here telling us to go to the Mod Manager integration menu to set up our paths, so we'll go ahead and do that. We're using Mod Organizer 2. We'll select the executable, and it should automatically find the mods folder. The file path length limit here is the longest file path that SynthEBD will allow when it's installing textures. If it sees a longer texture path, it'll automatically try to rename it and shorten it to comply with that limit. The Windows default limit is 260 characters, but I've found when paths are that long, apps open through MO2 can't see them. A limit of about 220 has been reliable for me, but you can adjust that up or down as necessary for you. Now we can go back to the main menu. You'll want to select the version of Skyrim that you're using, and make sure that the game data directory is correct. If not, use the select button to pick the one that's correct for you. For example, if you're using the stock game feature of Wabbajack, you'll want to select the portable version of Skyrim that's associated with your installation. Or if you're using Root Builder, you'll want to select the root data folder rather than the real Skyrim data folder. You can check if you've picked the right one by going to the status log and asking it to print your environment. You should see all of the mods in your load order. We'll also select a custom output folder so that SynthEBD writes its files to a particular folder, rather than putting them in overwrite. We'll select the MO2 folder, go to Mods, make a new folder, call it SynthEBD Output, and select this folder. Now we can start installing config files for the textures that we want. These config files can be found in several locations. You'll usually find the ones I've made alongside the main SynthEBD release. But sometimes if I'm making small updates to SynthEBD, I won't want to re-upload all of the config files, so instead I'll put a link for where to find them. For example, you can see them here in the assets. These are the ones I've made. In addition to these, a couple other people have started contributing to the SynthEBD ecosystem. Most notably, Pomona has a page on the Nexus for newer humanoid skins. For the Beast Races, Cram42 has some config files on GitHub. I've already downloaded a couple of these archives from my main collection, and I'll show you how to install those. Go to the Install Config from Archive button and find the downloaded zipped config file. We'll start with SynthEBD Bijan skin. It'll ask us a few questions as we're installing, such as what body type we're using. I'll select CBBE. Note that I need to have the CBBE mod installed as well, for these textures to look correct. Most installers will ask what texture resolution you want. If you don't have a lot of VRAM, you'll want to pick a lower resolution. There can be other options. Here it's asking if you want normal subsurface or no more ugly bronze shine. Ugly bronze shine can depend on your ENB and lighting settings. You'll know it when you see it. If your setup is prone to this, you can pick that option. Often for my config files, it'll ask if you want to use an accompanying bodygen config file. If you're planning to use bodygen to distribute body shapes, you'll want to say yes. If you don't want SynthEBD to manage body shapes, or are planning to use body slides instead, you can say no. Next, it'll ask you to select your downloaded assets, and you can click the link to open the download page. It'll tell you what file name it's expecting, but won't require you to submit that file. So if a texture artist updates their textures, but keeps all the same file names, you can still use the same config file. Select where that downloaded archive lives. Here I've downloaded Bayesian skin from the Nexus. And click Finish. Now that archive is going to be extracted and the installation will complete. It'll tell you that you need to restart your mod manager in order for SynthEBD to see the installed textures. But if we're going to be installing multiple config files, we might as well install all of them before restarting. I'll now install tempered skins for females. Now we have a warning that at least one of the files was going to be longer than the path length limit, and it's modified that config file to comply with that limit. We don't have to do anything ourselves. Just click OK and let it extract. Now we'll install the last config file. That will be tempered skins for males. We have the same warning about path lengths, so we'll click OK. Now we've finished installations, but we have this warning that we need to restart SynthEBD. The reason for that is that we haven't activated these texture mods in MO2. So if we try to run the patcher, it'll give us a lot of errors about not being able to find the expected files. We'll close SynthEBD, pull up MO2, refresh the mod list, and activate the newly installed texture mods. If you made a custom output folder, don't forget to activate that as well. We'll launch SynthEBD again, and now we can run the patcher. If you see warnings saying no valid asset packs could be applied, it's not an error. It just means you don't have any config files that apply to that particular NPC. For example, here I didn't install any config files for beast race women, although tempered skins covers males. We could install the config files from CRAM, and then those NPCs would be patched. At the end, you can see a summary of which NPCs were patched. If you want to see which textures went to which NPCs, you can open the generated combinations text file. Now you can close SynthEBD, activate the generated ESP, and launch SKSE to start the game.